Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and before we dive into today's topic, I do just want to remind you, if you are enjoying this podcast, then please give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future uploads, and feel free to leave a comment down below. I would love to engage with you in the comments. Today, let's talk about the concept of garbage in, garbage out. I honestly don't remember where I heard this from. I had an idea that it was something that came from some of the recovery groups that I've been a part of, but as soon as I was going to say that, my brain was like, wait a minute, just hold the phone on that a little bit. I'm not entirely certain that's where it came from. It might have even been something sooner. It might have even been, something I heard from a church years ago. And pretty much the concept of garbage in, garbage out is a way to inform our lives on what we're taking in, because that has an influence in how we speak, in how we act, in how we interpret the world around us. Great example of this is while I was playing with Odin earlier today and making myself some lunch, I was listening to some YouTube videos. The nature of these videos are journalistic, if I am being gracious about the content. It's hard to take in content on a social media platform, and YouTube is a social media platform, without there being some kind of agenda of how people want you to react. Whether we're talking about social media, whether we're talking about conventional media, journalism, there is always some kind of agenda that is taking place. And some of these agendas are actually very good. However, regardless of what the agenda of the journalist, of the online creator, regardless of the inherent good of what these people are trying to do, what they are trying to bring to our attention, it is also important for us to be aware of how these are impacting us. Now, this channel, I'm not going to say exactly who the channel is. I don't have an audience big enough for this to be a concern, but it's not something that I want to create any kind of a flame war or trolling war or anything like that. And I know that this content creator has the best interest at heart for what he's talking about here. Yet the impact that it had on me was it changed my mindset to be much more jaded, much more negative. And it's not to say that watching this kind of content is bad. God, it makes me think of like back in the 80s and the 90s when violence in video games was a huge topic, and there were even like congressional hearings about whether this was something that needed to be regulated. There is something to be said about the kind of material that we take in on a daily or on a weekly basis when you are engrossing yourself with things that are inherently violent, that can, note the use of the word can, it can have an impact on a desire to follow through with some of those more violent tendencies. That's not something that happens to everyone. there are some anecdotal stories about this actually taking place. I recall over the holidays, I was reading this article, I think it was from PC Gamer, where the writer was saying that he was playing Grand Theft Auto and was absolutely enjoying the game, and yet after playing it for several hours over the course of a couple of days, over a weekend, I forget entirely now how long of a time it was and how much he played, but he left his apartment and saw a police car and found himself wanting to walk up to the car and just open the door, pull the officer out, and start driving. Now, he didn't do this, and it's not to say that this was something that was inherently a desire within him, but what was coming into his brain was something that was coming out in his actions and in his thoughts. Thankfully, he caught himself and was like, whoa, no, this isn't something that I want to do. I recognize that this is an influence from the entertainment that I was taking in. This is something that is inherently anecdotal. In fact, I don't even believe that there is any kind of science to prove that playing violent video games or watching violent movies or listening to like heavy metal or anything like that is something that makes you a violent individual. And yet, it can have a subtle influence on us. The example of these YouTube videos that I was watching, they were having an influence on me. And I recognized that when I was finishing up with my lunch, I was going to get ready to come in here and record a podcast and sit down and get some work done. And my mind wasn't exactly in the best place because the content of the videos were making me upset at injustices that were being done to people, all for trying to make money. Injustice is one of the things that will get my tempers rising faster than anything, really. In fact, all you have to do is talk to my partner Libby about how we have some conversation or the idea that comes up about human trafficking, and oh, how quickly I will become passionate about that and how that's something that needs to stop and it's wrong. I am a passionate person, and I understand that. It's something that I have to keep in check. But when my passion does come out, it's something where I do become more forceful. I do want to influence other people and be heard and be understood. So my mind wasn't exactly in the best place for me to sit down and talk about some kind of topic for how we can be the heroes in our own stories. And ironically, this experience was one of those things that made me realize, this is exactly like the garbage in, garbage out concept. Why don't we talk about that? So inadvertently, it gave me an idea for the topic to talk about here. It is important, from my perspective, to be aware of how the content and the media that I am taking in is influencing me. I think that's one of the reasons why, as a gamer in general, I have a lot of people that wonder if I play games like Call of Duty or Battlefield or any of those militaristic shooter games, and I just do not enjoy them. I do not enjoy them because they're too real for me. I often say if I wanted to have a first-person military shooting experience, I would join the military, and I don't want to. So that is specific content that I do not take in. It's not something that I enjoy. There are people who enjoy it, and I have no problems with individuals who do enjoy playing those militaristic shooter games. I want to have a certain depth of fantasy or science fiction as a part of the entertainment, because it takes that step out of reality to where it does become something outside of the normal world. It gives it that depth of fiction so that it's easier for me to separate myself from it. And again, I want to stress here, that doesn't mean that it's bad to take in any of this kind of media. If it's something that you enjoy, go for it. However, always be aware that the people that are making this media, whether we're talking actual like journalism, that kind of media, if we're talking about social media, if we're talking about movies and TV, if we're talking about video games, if we're talking about music, these are all trying to elicit feelings inside of us. There is a reason why when someone experiences a heartbreak, there is such a pull to listen to music that validates what you're feeling. There is something that is, I don't know how common it is actually. For me personally, it really fits, but when I'm feeling sad, when I'm feeling depressed, I'm not drawn to listening to music that builds me up or music that comforts me and makes me forget about what happened. I want to listen to music that really feeds into the feelings that I'm having. There's something about that validation. And this is something that I see a lot online, where individuals silo themselves so much by their own, say, political views and the kind of people that they will interact with and the kind of content that they will take in, that they are only taking in things that make them feel validated about what it is that they strongly believe in. That's why it's so hard to have conversations with people on any of these social media platforms. I mean, for one thing, using text is not a great way to try and have these conversations with individuals. There is so much that is missed when all you have is the written word. And there's so much that is left to interpretation. And we tend to interpret a lot of this as the worst possible thing that we can, which is why there's usually flame wars or all sorts of terrible interactions that people experience when someone just has a different perspective. Is a lot of people interpret it as an attack, and they have to defend their point of view. They have to defend their perspective, and it's just so unhealthy. Going back to my example, this channel that I was watching some videos on, I don't subscribe to this channel. It was something that I'd seen pop up in the subscription feed, or not the subscription feed, the recommended videos on Libby's channel that we often watch a lot of stuff through. And I was kind of curious about it. So I'm like, you know what? I've got this time where I'm just going to be cooking. I'm playing tug of war and throwing the tennis ball for Odin, as he was bored. The time of this recording is the first day that we are back to work after our holiday break. And he had 2 weeks where we were not working, and we were spending more time going on walks and drives and in the living room, or even going and visiting friends and family. And so it was a little bit of, we'll say, shell shock for him today. And he was like, you guys have to go back to work? So, trying to give him some good play this morning. And while we were doing that, it's like, you know what? I've got this time. I can listen to this content. And I was curious. And I watched one video. And then I watched another one. Then I went over to a different channel. And I watched, I think, 4 videos. All about... No, not all about the same thing. I guess I watched like 5 videos on that one channel. One that was tied to the previous 2 videos, and then 4 that were all their own topic. And I recognized that I was not in a good place. Again, these guys are being very journalistic about it. They are following all the rules about journalism, and it's free speech. They're able to say what they want so long as they're ready to accept the consequences of it. And these guys they're ready to accept those consequences. Yet, I still found myself realizing that I went down a rabbit hole that if I stayed there much longer, I would have likely not had the bandwidth to sit down and record this podcast. I realized that if I continue down this, it's going to get into an area of unhealth. So it's important that this is something that you recognize in yourself. Enjoy and take in the information and the content that you desire, that you want to know about. But it's also important to balance that with things that are more life-giving in nature. I don't think that it had as much of an impact when I first started watching these because I was doing something that was more life-giving. I was playing with my puppy and we were having a great time. As soon as all I was doing was preparing and eating my lunch, I just noticed that I was getting into a negative space. My brain and my emotions had been manipulated more by this content than I had known until I really checked in with myself. Which is why I took a break from engaging with this content anymore. I had a lot of my questions answered about my curiosities for the content of these videos. And I went and engaged with Libby. We talked a little bit, gave her a hug. I sat down on the couch and gave Odin some pets and some attention. And then it's like, you know what? This was an experience where I had garbage coming in and it was starting to influence how I was responding, and that was the garbage coming out. And this is an important distinction. It's up to you to determine what is garbage and what's clean. I heard it described that with this concept, the more garbage you're taking in, the more it's like a river flowing through your body, and that garbage just packs up and builds up to where the water can't flow that well. And that can be your energy, that can be your attention, that can be your creativity, that can be compassion, that can be love, that can be acceptance. Whatever it is, this garbage causes a block, and you don't get a whole lot of this water flowing through anymore. if you change what you're taking in to where you're taking in more clean water, then it starts to break up the debris and it starts to process through your being, through your mind, through your emotions, through your body. And it cleans it out so that the river is able to flow so much easier and stronger and freely. And that's what I needed to do. Especially when we are dealing with something like journalism, where journalism is one of those things that it's good to be informed, and yet so much of it just can rile you up, especially if you're going for the extreme ends of either side of the political spectrum. If you are a conservative and all you're taking in is Fox News, you've siloed yourself in. And I have seen what Fox does, and it's not that great. It's not that great for people's mental health. And I'm not saying that it's okay to go to the opposite end. What is the opposite end? Like MSNBC or something like that? Where if it's more of a liberal swing, you don't want to silo yourself there either. It is important for us to take in the important information. I just realized I used important twice there. I guess that makes it doubly important. We want to take in the information, and while we are doing that, we also need to be aware of any manipulation of our psyche, of our feelings, of our energies. If you are listening to something and it gets you so mad, and you just kind of fall into that rabbit hole, and you just find yourself getting more and more mad, that is going to be incredibly draining. And it might even cause you to become antagonistic towards others that you encounter. And maybe unjustly so. Really, a lot of this just comes down to balance. Again, it is okay to take in news from your favorite news sources. But, maybe you need to turn that off instead of having that going for hours on end every night. Maybe you only check in once or twice with your social media accounts. Maybe you actually get some information on these things that you're very passionate about, and then you mediate that a little bit with doing something that's a little more enjoyable. Oh gosh, just made me think of this YouTube trend from several years ago now of people watching videos that it was a 50-50 chance whether you would see something normal, quote normal, and then see something that was like absolutely gross. And then after a while it's like, these people couldn't take that anymore. And so what would they do? They would start to look at images of puppies and kittens. And that was almost the same way of trying to balance out what they were taking in. And they called it, I guess they were calling it eye bleach, where trying to overload their eyes and their brains with everything that they were taking in that was gross, that was disgusting, that was obscure, that was maybe even unhealthy, and trying to have something that was balancing that was cleaning it out. I feel like I've kind of been all over the place on this one. It feels more prudent to be aware of societal influence on us. And it's actually one of the things that makes it so much more enjoyable for me to spend time with Libby and with my friends. Because it's a place where I know that these people love me, and if they're going to say anything that's going to be challenging, they're saying it for a reason. There's something that they have observed that might not be the best for me to be mulling over, for me to be considering or thinking about. Spending time with these people that I love and adore, to me, feels like it just floods me with this crystal clear water that is going to remove the detritus that is causing the blockage in whatever it happens to be. In today's society, when it seems there's always an agenda, there's always, God, I'm even afraid to say it, but hate, this bias, this attempt to try and sway people from one side to another. It is so important for us to be in control of our own emotions and what we're taking in. I am very, very scrupulous on the content that I take in. And you have an example for why that's important for me. It is important for me to do so because I can find myself in an unhealthy place otherwise. I can find myself zapped of my creativity. I can find myself zapped of energy and a desire to do something that is ultimately going to be good for me to do, and instead resort to some kind of dissociative behavior to distract myself. So be careful of what you take in. Be careful to determine what is garbage in your life and be as informed as you can without that turning into a pile of muck that just takes so much effort and time to clean out of your system. Allow this river to flow through you. Allow the good and clean content, energies, thoughts, emotions, let those flow through you. And if you find yourself in a down place, it might be time to disengage from some of this. And that is okay. You're not running away from it. You're taking care of yourself so that you can better handle it when you're in a much more stable place. I hope this has been inspiring to you, and I continue to hope that my life examples are of some benefit to you in this journey to become the hero in your own story. And until next time, live strong for today.